Harsh, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to be here, Anupam.
Nice of you.
And it's so great to be mentioned in your book, and it is a real pleasure reading it as well.
Thank you so much, Harsh. It was a great interview that we had done back in last year. Tell us about yourself, because I want listeners to know your Fee Only Investment Advisor that you set up in 2015, your experience before that, because you've seen a lot among the original team at ICICI Bank. Let's talk about that for a while, your background.
Typical middle class background professional, you sort of do your. I did my chartered accountancy. Like a lot of other middle class folks, wanted to make a lot of money. Did tax, then joined ICICI. I had the good fortune to join ICICI. I had the great fortune to work under some great bosses, Mr. Kamath, Lalita Gupte, Shikha Sharma. And, a lot of things that I have learned. I've learned, working under them, talking to my colleagues. I think it was an amazing experience. All my life, I've realized I've done new things. Okay, I've done so many new things that it is sometimes, I enjoy doing new things. And so I worked there for 5 years, then branched out in my own. The three of us got out and started in those days an investment banking outfit that specialized in structured products, leasing in those days. 98, I went back to ICICI in a senior role this time, and I set up retail lending for them.
Wow.
under Shikha's guidance, and I fell in love with retail. Prior to that, I had always been a wholesale institutional person. 98 is when that shift happened to retail, and I've never looked back since. You're talking to real people, real stories. You're looking at impact. When you give a home loan, you're changing somebody's life. And I think that hooked me. My tax background helped me dramatically. And that's how I've always remained current on that. 2 years later, I started off the first of my ventures, Apna Loan, which ultimately morphed into Apna Paisa. Again, a new thing, providing a service that didn't exist or was not very well delivered to consumers. And that I exited in 2015. The story of coming into or starting the advisory practice also is, it's not something that was pre-planned. Unlike my other ventures, this was something that happened. The deal that I had made, it was reported in the papers. So, a rich man and his money are invited to every wedding in town. So, every person would come and talk to me. And since I had signed a non-compete and was not able to do what I knew, I had time on my hands, and I sort of met up with almost every wealth manager in the country. And I realized something was not right about this. And very clearly, and when something is not right about an industry which was adjacent to something I had done all my life, the whole premise of Apna Loan, Apna Paisa was doing something right for the consumer. And that's how this idea of an investment advisory practice started. Can we do something that's on the right side of the investor, which is keeping the investor's interest in the, at a higher level than yours.
Yeah, very interesting, Harsh. So, Harsh, you've always been pro-consumer, pro-client, pro-investor, and that's how your career even shaped out till 2015, and then the SEBI regulations for investment advisory came in 2013, and you were quite well set when you set up Fee Only. Tell us about Fee Only, and how that leverages from your almost 20-year-long experience in working for the consumer and, having the consumer or your client's interest best in mind. And the name that you chose is also quite interesting. Fee Only Investment Advisor. Talk to us about that.
So I think I'd taken the license in 2013. It wasn't operational at that point of time. And in 2015, I activated it. I think what I realized when all these wealth managers visited me to sort of quote unquote help me in investing the wealth that I had, I think what I realized was that their interests were not aligned to mine. They were not very transparent. So, and this is something I had seen. Whether it was the loan industry, whether it was the insurance industry, whether it was the mutual fund industry, those were things we had done in Apna Paisa. I was quite clued on to that. I had done that, except I had done it from a slightly different angle. And that helped me make up my mind that this is something I want to do. It was fortunate that I was not under any pressure to sort of, have revenues or have a minimum number of clients. I could afford the infrastructure that was required to give a decent service, even though when I started, I had very, very few clients. The name Fee Only came a little later. The concept came first. I think a professional, and I think investment advisory is a profession. A professional gets paid by the person to whom he renders the service. There's nothing wrong in commission. We had commission when we started, and we always kept clients' interest above. But like I tell my clients, as an investment advisor, as a SEBI registered investment advisor, keeping client interest above my own or being a fiduciary is regulated. Which means if I don't do it, my license, I can lose my license. There are umpteen examples. Let's say a client comes into a surplus and he approaches me. What should I do with this, Harsh? Should I invest this or should I repay the loan that I have? Now, I will consider it. I will take everything into account and I will advise him. But suppose I advise him that he should invest it because, it makes sense. The loan is coming at a lower rate, etc. There is a conflict of interest inherent there, because if he repays the loan, my fee, which is based on assets under advice, remains the same. Whereas if he invests, my fee goes up. Now, I have not let that influence my decision, but I must let the client know that there is this inherent conflict of interest. So please take a decision based on knowing this conflict. Very, very relevant in real estate. Typically, we don't charge on real estate. Now, a client will approach us on whether he should keep the real estate, sell the real estate. All my writings, I am not a very pro real estate person. They know that. Plus, there is the conflict of interest that if he keeps the real estate, I don't charge a fee on it. My fee is lower. He sells it, puts it into financial asset, my fee goes up. Now, I don't let that influence my decision. I feel good because I'm regulatorily required to disclose the conflict of interest. And I think almost every client is wise enough to know when he sees a professional opinion coming. I think people can make out when an opinion is professional and when it is conflicted.
Yeah. So, folks, we're spending time talking about this because it's very important for you to understand how the financial planning process works and the fees that you're paying to your planner. Remember that we're talking about RIs out here, SEBI registered investment advisors, who only earn their fees, their revenues from you, the client. They do not earn a rupee from any products that they sell. And that's fundamentally different from other models that are out there in the market where, a distributor of a financial product will sell something to you and he doesn't get paid by you, by the way. He gets paid by the product manufacturer whose product that he's selling. Harsh, before we go into a break, if you can just tell us about your range of services. Folks, the website, you can just Google it, Harsh Roongta, Fee Only Investment Advisor. Then the website is pretty comprehensive, and as per SEBI, you have to give your fees also out there, right? Whatever is the regulation there.
So we have to provide it in the letter of engagement. We don't necessarily have to put it on the website. We have.
Oh, okay.
So one of our guiding principles is transparency.
Yeah.
So we have on our website put up our entire fee structure so that clients know what they are getting into. Obviously, even before we give them any service, we are required to sign a letter of engagement. The website also contains details of what we do and, more importantly, what we don't do.
Let's get into that for a bit before we go into the break.
So, I mean, what we do is that we basically handle a limited number of clients, but we provide comprehensive financial planning and, life planning services. Financial planning probably is about numbers, your goals, your resources, today's resources, tomorrow's resources, your risk profiling, what is your risk profile, etc. But more important than that are what motivates you. What are the things, okay? And several of the people you have spoken to in the book talk about this, and so do I. I mean, there is a huge amount of commonality between the six of us that you have put in the book, because it is very important to understand what drives a consumer. Okay, I mean, a simple example is health. Okay, and I think you have quoted that somewhere in the book, right? A person does not, the goal can be to lose weight. Okay, actually, what are the things that are motivating him? Because I think depending on what is motivating him, you can even talk to the person to change his goal, because you need to understand his base goal. Is he losing weight to feel fitter, to be more productive at work, to impress his girlfriend? Okay, what does he want to do it for? Because I think the solutions you will find will be a little different depending on what he's doing. So, one goal is not the same as the other goal. And I think that is extremely important.
Harsh, you recently written a column about how people need to calculate their finances in a better manner before they take this decision of jumping ship. Whether it is quitting the job, doing your own firm, or this very popular what's called FIRE. A lot of you listeners would have heard about it, which is financially independent, retire early, quit to start your own businesses, and stuff like that. You wrote a column on this where you said, Harsh, that professionals might actually have enough money already to take that decision if they only took the trouble to calculate. Let's talk about that.
So I think the best way to explain this is by the real case study. I mean, that was such a blinding insight. So here we had this couple, okay, I mean, doing extremely well, more than 10 lakhs a month net income for the couple, houses, great house, 2 kids. Of course, when your income is like that, your goals are also like that. So kids going to expensive schools, goals also overseas, etc., etc. So everything was there. What they had done was a large part of their investable surplus was in 2 assets. Even the house was something on which they still had a loan. Okay. Then they had assets on which they had a loan, a real estate asset on which they had a loan. So a large part of the income, which was salary income for both of them, was really going into servicing those loans. There was very little left over. And there is this, so it's not that he had not made investments in financial assets, there were financial assets. But when we talked to them, when we realized, that this was not something, he was still not feeling comfortable. And when we sat down, we did the numbers and we then showed it to him. If only you sell off this other property, investment property that you have, use the money to pay off both the loans. He had a loan on his house, loan on that property. You will still have a surplus. Your financial assets are more than enough for you to, go slow. And that was a insight for him. He really didn't feel it. It was his numbers, right? They were all there. When we did it for him, what that made him do was that he became confident enough. He loved what he was doing. It wasn't that he didn't love what he was doing. But he was just having to spend too much time. He was traveling incessantly. He went back to his employers and said, "Oh, this is not working out for me. You pay me less. I still want to do this part of the work that I enjoy. I don't want to travel. So take away those responsibilities, pay me less. I want to continue. He was a very valuable asset. The company would held on to him. Very little compromise on his money, but his life changed completely. He was able to spend more time with his children who are soon going to be, out of the nest. Okay. At a very appropriate time, he's getting to spend money. And that was such an insight. It was like I mentioned in that article about this elephant, okay, who's kept chained with a small little chain, because when he was a baby elephant, at that point of time, that chain was enough to hold him. And he grew up into this mighty elephant, still believing that that chain will continue to hold him, so never even trying to break free. The calculations helped him break free. I think that is the key.
Very interesting. This is applicable to someone who's of that bracket, again, double income, fairly high income. What would be the conversation that you would have with someone who's just starting his career? Maybe a 25-year-old, 28-year-old, 29-year-old, who's very clear that he wants to, as the saying goes, be independent financially and retire early at whatever age, 40, 45. Let's just talk a little bit about that. How should this person approach his or her finances? Because I'm assuming that you're looking at least 15 to 20 year runway or whatever path that you've got, which is really long. And there are a lot of possibilities open. What would you talk with this person?
So we do talk with people like these. These typically happen to be the children of our clients. My clients tend to be a little older. And the children of the clients have also started working. They're doing good jobs. And this concept comes up. I discovered the name only recently, but the concept has always been there. So if you break this up, financially independent, retire early. Let's pick up retire early. I think most people, when they talk of retire early, essentially mean it's not that they are not going to work. What they want to say and what they mean is that I want to work, but I will do what I want to do, even though it may mean earning less. So typically what the logic is that do 15 years of time effectively, do 15 years of time, accumulate your credits during that 15 years or 20 years of time, and then use those credits to live the rest of your life the way you want to live it. I think it's also a little bit changing. So if we pick up the retire early, we now see, so I'll give you an exact example about a client who has to choose excellent degrees, who has to choose between the standard investment banking job versus working for a not-for-profit. Now,
nice choice.
Yeah. Now, what is the way that she is looking at it? This is a lady client. What is the way that she is looking at it? And this is something I am learning from her. I am not coaching her. This is something I have learned from her. She says, this is what I want to do even after I am 40. Okay? Or what? So I'm starting my career by retiring, by that definition, because I am doing what I love to do. If I don't like this organization, I'll go to another organization. But this is what I want to do with my life. What has it meant? It has meant that I'm earning less. Can you help me decide whether at least I will meet the other goals that I might have? And at some point, I may not be able to work. So after that, I will still live. So will I be able to meet those goals? Again, so that it's a very novel way of looking at it.
It is.
And if you now pick the second part, the financially independent part, her point was that, my parents are well-to-do. Eventually, they have house that's going to come to me. Why should I even plan for it?
So that takes one big chunk out of
because to be financially independent, one of the biggest chunk is buying your house.
Roti, kapda aur makan.
Roti, kapda aur makan. Roti, kapde ke itne paise nahi lagte. Makan ke bahut paise lagte.
Yeah.
Moment you took that out of the equation, she was able to take that decision. So she had approached us before taking that decision. She was clearly able to take that decision. Ki, hey, this works for me from day one. I don't have to wait for 20 years. Now, she may be an aberration, okay? But my point is ki people, I come back to calculations and being very clear what retirement means for you and what financial independence means for you. I think if you define that reasonably well, and this is very important for somebody who's say 10 years into a job or 8-10 years, this thing about the house, because there are two big overhangs. House, children's education. You remove those two overhangs, everything else I think is very easily manageable.
Yeah. So folks, I think a lot of you all are waiting for Harsh to say that buy this mutual fund or have 50% in debt, 60% in equity. I'm sorry, you're going to get none of that. I think you need to understand what Harsh is saying, and I think that's the critical point of financial planning. Emotions, priorities. None of these can be captured in an Excel file. And honestly, folks, if you wanted to get all that advice, you could have gone anywhere else and made your own Excel file on asset allocation and what to do, etc., etc. You need to focus on big picture out here. You need to focus on priorities, goals, emotions. A lot of that will actually define your financial planning more than this. Am I on the right track here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So related to that, and since probably our listeners are waiting for that whole, you'd get a lot of clients coming to you, na, ki, sir, ye mera portfolio hai, and this is the return I'm getting. Please help me. And what I like about the concept of holistic goal-based financial planning is, and as you said in the book, that if you're in the race to have the best investment return on your portfolio, then I'm probably not the right guy for you. Let's talk about that for a while. How does that work?
So I'll explain this in two ways. I mean, this we make it clear to a client. Ki if you are looking for a coach to help you win, this is a marathon. Your life planning is a marathon. You want to win the race, we are not the right coaches. You want to finish the race on your terms. You're not competing with anybody else. You're doing it for yourself. You want to finish this race comfortably, then we are the absolute right coaches for you. And I think when you explain this with examples, clients are able to relate to that, quite well. One very important thing that a client taught me, and he asked me this question, Ki Harsh, what's wrong? Ki I try very hard to get the best returns on my investment, and jab bhi paisa chahiye, I have a lot of money. Let me try and maximize my return. Jabhi bhi, whenever I need the money, I will withdraw from it, and the rest of the money is earning. So why should I not try to maximize returns? What can be the problems with maximizing my return? The answer that I gave him, and it has convinced him. First is this whole concept of not planning for your goals. What that does is that the automatically priority comes to the goal that comes first in time. So if the goal that comes first in time is a car, then money gets allocated to that because it has come. So you take money out and give it. Children's education, that comes first before your quote unquote retirement. So you take out money and give it to that. So you have not done thing ki you may run out of petrol before you reach a most important destination. This exercise about which of the destinations you should visit is a trade-off. And not doing that planning beforehand means that you might be taking extremely suboptimal decisions on doing things that if you had planned you would never do. If I gave you a toss-up between buying a car and retiring reasonably well, or more importantly making sure that your child went to Harvard, I don't think he would have and she would have any problems in deciding. So that is one issue with the maximum return or not planning for the goals. The second with maximum returns is that obviously maximum returns comes with maximum risk. I mean, these are like linked to each other, right? You cannot get, so return, risk, liquidity, that is the criteria for any investment. You want to maximize returns, you have to compromise on risk or liquidity or both. Now, goals that are say 1 year away, even if you are the most risky, risk-taking personality, if the goals are 1 year away, you will not consider equity. Even though you might be, somebody who takes risks for a living. So doing that with your entire portfolio is an extremely it does not make sense, and I think that convinced the client.
Yeah, Harsh, I want to understand this as concepts of financial planning. When you've got a 15-20 year, let's say, because financial planning should typically be of that. If you're having a discussion of kya lagta hai folks, then that's not this episode. Okay, if you have that kind of a long time frame, time is in your side. Broadly, what you think should be the 2 or 3 things that our listeners should keep in mind when they're planning for their goals? Because when you're looking at that long time frame, you're including a lot of big goals in that. Could be marriage, could be car, could be house, could be kids, could be anything. Broadly, what are the right approaches here, or what should the listener be thinking when he's making a financial plan for that? Because in my conversations, what I've had with a lot of people is, what is a good long-term return? Yeah, now I don't know. 8% over 20 years is also great. 10% is great. Obviously, higher return over long period is the best. I'm not sure that's always the right way to do it, because there's taxation. There's a whole lot of issues. Guide us through that. Help our listeners to make a framework when they're doing a very long-term financial plan for their lives.
So I think first is what you need to figure out. So I would start first with the goals. I mean, apart from entire behavior, etc., which is so we would never, for example, our plans take at least 30 to 45 days.
Wow.
I mean, that's something.
When you engage a client for the first time,
when we engage a client for the first time, we make it very clear to him, please do not expect any plan from us for at least, and 30 to 45 days is if you are quick in responding.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
It does take that much time if you really want to do a good job. Coming back to the numbers, I think it's very, very important for you to set your goals. And one thing is changing now, but one thing is that people have far bigger aspirations for their children and, much less for themselves. And I keep reminding them that when you're traveling in the aircraft, they will tell you, right, that when these oxygen masks drop and you have a child traveling with you, you must first wear the mask yourself before, helping your child. Same thing applies to your goals. A goal that will keep you financially independent is important for the child too. Although on the surface it sounds selfish, one of the best things you can do for your child is never be financially dependent on him, never be physically dependent on him. You need to work on your health as much as on your wealth. And first for yourself, simply because that takes off he is going to or she is going to start their lives. You don't want them to start their lives thinking, oh my God, I have to look at, my parents for the next 20, 30 years, how I'm going to spend my life supporting them. No matter if you have forced them, if you have helped them to go to Harvard, it does not matter. You don't want them to end up with that responsibility. So I think helping yourself first is a key. Doing the trade-offs is very important, because when you are, when clients come to us first, they're pretty expansive in their goals. And we are now not talking of people who have all the resources in the world. If they have all the resources in the world, then, it's a different thing. We're talking of people who have to do these trade-offs. And one of the things that they realize, is that some things are more important. For example, more and more clients are beginning to look at giving back. When they start doing the goals, they realize, one of the things that I heard one of my clients say that, it's difficult to earn money. It's even more difficult to give back money. The point is that even for that you have to do planning, and even that involves a trade-off, probably with some other goal. Is it that important to you? Do you really think you will be able to do it? And if you want to do it, then you need to plan for it today rather than tomorrow. So I think goal planning is important. Risk profiling. What is your risk taking ability? Because as they say, everybody is a risk taker in a bull market. Okay. I think when the chips are down, how did you behave? And there are these structured behavioral questionnaires which are not investment related, where you give a case scenario, look at how the person would react to this hypothetical situation that enables you to, ultimately it is what people do, not what they say, that is risk, but it gives you a much better idea. So I think all these things you need to take into account.
Folks, goal planning in 2 words, important. Harsh, let's wrap up this episode with, you mentioned about behavior. Okay, let's talk about these oddities, because I remember you, for my book, you'd given a very interesting case study. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are the insights you've got from your clients on this behavioral aspect, weird stuff, and any colorful stuff that you can share with the listeners, because I want them to leave this episode thinking that okay, aisa bhi hota hai types.
So I've learned so much in this 7-year journey as an investment advisor. I'll just give 2. So I very early on in my career as an investment advisor, there is this friend who came to me for investment advice, paid my fees, and gave us all this information. And we were trying to do the probe goals, etc. Now, he was rich, full resources were available. All his goals were being easily met. And he said, I will do the investment myself. You just give me an asset allocation. And I'm just wondering, why has he come to me? He's not really listening to me. And then it flashed upon me that one of the goals was to buy a very high-end car. Okay. He has all the resources. It's his money. But he's basically looking for a validation that bhai main ye gaadi, I'm buying this car, but it's okay. It's okay to buy this car. And that was, this is not a financial thing. It's an emotional thing. Another thing that I remember very clearly was, we were working with this client and he wanted to buy a house. That was one of his important goals. We did the numbers, and based on his financial resources, etc., we said, you should buy now. Okay. And he was very reluctant to buy now. And I was wondering, and I was talking to him, I was taking him through the numbers, see, you have these funds and this and that, and he would say yes, but he was not saying, I will buy. So I was wondering, and that's where probing helps. So you probe. Then it dawned on me. He then told me, and in that conversation, I was alone with him, not my colleague wasn't there with me. He told me, see, I'm staying with my parents. I'm staying with them in their house. But, they depend on me financially. If I buy my own house, they will feel very insecure.
Wow.
Now, that is, it's not financial, but it is important. And I think these things are so important that they will overcome any financial Excel sheet that you will draw up. And understanding them and making sure that you fit the plan around their requirement rather than the other way around is what life planning and financial planning.
What can how does one look for a planner who has all these things in his mind? Tell me about that, because I want that to be the last question in our Advisor Perspective series, that our listeners can take away some very specific insights that when they're looking for financial advice, wo chahe muft ho, chahe free ho, chahe YouTube wala ho, jo bhi ho, or it could be someone as experienced as you. What are the few things that they should keep in mind when they're looking for advice on their financial matters? Because, I'm sure you get a lot of questions. I certainly do get a lot of questions. What would be your view on this? How do you choose good financial advice?
So I think 2 things. Okay. Like any advice, any important advice, right? If something is wrong with my health, I go to my doctor. Now, my doctor happens to be my childhood friend, but he knows that I'm going to do research. He cannot prescribe a medicine. I will ask him, what is this medicine for? What are the side effects? What are the pros, cons, etc. But I've always found that no matter how extensively I read on the web, no matter who I read, please remember, there are no free lunches in life. 1, out of context advice can be dangerous. Okay. So a simple example is that Maruti is a good car. A Maruti, I don't know what is the latest
Whatever.
model. A Maruti Alto is a good car. Yes, of course it's a good car. But what are you going to use it for? If you're going to use it off-road, no, it's not a good car. But that is not a saying on Maruti Alto. That's a saying on what you will use it for. Same thing with coming back to the health advice. By reading up on the web, I'm able to ask intelligent questions. So that's one. Use the free advice. Even that, be careful where you look up those free advice. But use that as a guiding principle to please remember some expert or some advisor will take your context into account and explain it to you in your context. That I think is important. Second, always know the person giving advice, whether it is free or whether it is paid, how is he making money? So if it is so-called free, he is making some money from the advertisement. So he could be a finfluencer, and that's been very, very controversial recently. Or if he's so-called advisor and he's, getting paid from, again, as I said, there's nothing wrong as long as you are aware and conscious. And I think the whole thing is about taking decisions consciously, doing trade-offs consciously.
Folks, there you go. Doing trade-offs consciously and health. So much of knowledge out there. That is a wrap on this episode of Paisa Vaisa, the Advisor Perspective series to help you make better financial decisions. My guest, Harsh Roongta, founder at Fee Only Advisors India. Harsh, thank you, for taking the time, for spending so much time and giving your insights to our listeners. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Anupam. It was a real pleasure.
Good to have you here.
No material on the show should be considered as financial advice. The material on the show is for informational purposes only. Please consult a financial advisor before taking any investment decision.